Hello and welcome back to the TCM YouTube channel for the sixth of our season previews for the 8 women's regional side. It is the turn of Sunrisers, and joining us today is Polly. First of all, how are you?
Yeah, I'm very good, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for joining us as well. So we start by taking a look back at last season. It wasn't really a pretty one, I think it's fair to say, for the Sunrisers. No wins all season, 8th in the Rachel Hale Flint and 4th in their Charlotte Edwards Cup group. As a whole, to start with, what did you make of the season?
Yeah, as you say, not the best. Pretty poor to not register a win. But I think, the results don't really show how the season truly went for them. I think they got close at some points. There were some games where actually they could have won, but they didn't get over the line. But yeah, as you say, overall, not a good performance. It didn't feel like as a team they were kind of together. It felt a bit disjointed. There were real standout players like Grace Scrivens, but then no one else, supporting her and backing up her individual performances. So not a good season for Sunrisers, but there has been a lot of change ahead of next season. So it could be looking very different for them.
Definitely, and you touched on Grace Scrivens there, arguably the standout player last year for the Sunrisers, averaging one of the highest averages in both formats and highest wicket takers. And then over the winter, player of the tournament and in the team of the tournament for the under-19 Women's World Cup. What did you make of her performances last season?
Yeah, Grace Scrivens was the backbone of Sunrisers. She was unbelievable. Rachel Hare Flint, 297 runs, I think it was, which was third overall in the entire competition. And then obviously for her team, she was the leading run scorer. She's also leading wicket taker. So she is just the all-round package. She has great leadership skills. And I just thought she was outstanding, head and shoulders above everyone else in that team. And, to be only 19 is unbelievable to be doing so well. I think for her it's gonna get quite frustrating if those performances from the whole team aren't coming, because again they're just relying on her, and actually she can't perform to her best, because for example when she's batting she might stay there. I think one game she got into the 80s or 90s, but she couldn't get a century because everyone else got out. And so that must be quite frustrating for her as an individual, especially if she's if she's got ambitions to play for England, and she can't kind of have those performances as a team to make her look really good as well. So it must be quite frustrating for her, but she has been absolutely outstanding, and she's by far their best player.
Definitely, I think it's fair to say a very bright future ahead for her. But looking elsewhere in that 50-over competition, Cordelia Griffith was the other notable player with runs, averaging just under 45 with a couple of 50s. What did you make of her performances last summer?
Yeah, I think she did quite well. She is a little bit inconsistent, but I also think that has to do with the fact that she's been moved around the order a bit. So sometimes she'll open the batting, sometimes she'll come in at 4 or 5. And I think that is something that describes Sunrisers quite well, is that their lineups have been quite inconsistent. And yes, I get tactically they want to change people around because you're not going to stick with the lineup that keeps losing you games. But it also is quite difficult for the individual players because their role in that team is constantly changing. And I think that's happened with Cordelia. I think she is a strong player. She did struggle in the 100 with Manchester Originals, but I think she she needs people like Grace to bat with her, and they can stay there for a long time and learn to build those partnerships quite well. But again, yeah, consistency is what we need to see from her.
For sure. And then in the bowling department, former England player, well, and still has hopes for it as well, Maddie Villiers took 12 wickets in the Rachel Hove Flint, and equally instrumental in the T20 stuff as well. How important is her international experience in this side going forward?
Oh, it's vital. She knows how to deal with, I say she knows how to deal with pressurising situations, but of course she was the one that slightly cost them the game against Western Storm when they could have won. But she has that experience, and I think Sunrisers are quite lucky that, they don't have those contracted players that are going to disappear. She's going to stick around for a long time. So it'll be an interesting kind of scenario how that plays out. But yeah, I think it could be good.
Definitely, and then just switching it up to the T20 comp, focusing on that a bit more. A couple of other names in the batting department, Amara Carr and Joe Gardner, stood out as making up a whole batting lineup. What did you make of them, and especially going forward for this year?
Well, I think their batting lineup is probably stronger than their bowling lineup. Amara Khan was injured for part of last season, but I think her coming back in, and I know Joe Gardner's been over playing in Australia, so we'll have that experience and we'll have had a full winter of playing to kind of find her form. So I think actually they're in the best position possible. They've had all that time to be out in the middle and just get game time, which perhaps they haven't had over the summer in England when they get out for five, well, that's their game done. So no, I think it's really positive, and it's just about kind of getting that cohesive team performance. And again, people to stick with Grace Griffiths and build partnerships, because we know how well she can do, but actually she can really help other players to kind of elevate their game and come into the game really well.
Yeah, and then someone else from that T20 competition, Naomi Detoni, top run scorer for the Sunrisers. She's now left for a new club. How are they going to fill that void that she's left now?
Yeah, I think it's quite difficult because obviously she batted up top, so they need to find someone to kind of truly replace that. I suppose they've got Saskia Hawley in and Dana Van Niekerk. Of course, Saskia will only play in with the Rachel A. Flint, but Dana Van Niekerk coming in, I mean, she can essentially replace anyone with the utmost respect to Naomi Tatani. But again, Naomi is a huge loss for that team because she did score plenty of runs. She bowled quite well. She was relatively consistent, so she'll be a big loss because also she was quite an experienced player. She was one of the older players in the team, and they have got quite a young side. So actually, her going to Thunder will be quite a bit of a loss for them. But I suppose in the Charlotte Edwards Cup, having Dana Van Niekerk come in actually fills that void quite well.
Definitely a world class talent. I think the Sunrisers side could more than do with. And you mentioned Saskia Hawley there also coming in, but someone else coming in, Eva Gray, coming in from the Southeast Stars, if I remember correctly. The bowling department last year wasn't the strongest and probably hindered them a bit. How important is her quality going to be to add to those already at the club?
I'm really excited to see Eva Gray because she did so well for the Oval Invincibles in the 100, leading wicket taker. I think she got 9 wickets. And I don't think she got the opportunity she would have wanted for Southeast Stars. She said herself, they're a team stacked full of talent, and so it's really hard to break into that side. But I think she's been really smart to make the move to Sunrisers. She's got a professional contract, so she's been training the whole winter as a full pro. And I think she's a really exciting player. We've seen her a bit in the warm-up games so far, and I think she's been excellent. And I think she'll take on kind of responsibilities that she wouldn't have been given at Southeast Stars. She's only I think she's 22, 23. She's quite young, but she's got loads of experience under her belt already, playing in high-pressure situations. She played in the final of the 100, so she knows how to kind of deal with that, and tactically she's quite aware. So I think she'll add a lot to the bowling lineup this year.
So Eva Gray is one of the contracted players for Sunrisers. Also joining her is Amara Carr, Kelly Castle, Joe Gardner, Cordelia Griffith, Grace Goins, and Maddie Villiers in the new ones the ECB have rolled out. One of those names we haven't talked about so far is Kelly Castle. Took 7 wickets in the Charlotte Edwards Cup last season at just under 17 apiece. How impressed were you by her?
Yeah, again, I was quite impressed. Of course, she had the captaincy, so that's quite a difficult role when you're captaining a losing team. I think that's quite a burden, especially when they did come close to wins, that emotional toll it takes. So I think that does affect your performances. I think she's had some good individual performances, but then there've been some really poor ones. I know in one of the warm-up games last week, she went for like 17 and over, and that's quite difficult to come back from, especially when you're also captaining the side and there is that responsibility that you lead from the front as the captain and you score runs, you take wickets. So I think that is quite challenging for her. I would like to see her get a few more runs this season, to be honest, because I think that was missing last season. But I think that is kind of dependent on how the team do as a whole and how much burden there is to her as a captain.
For sure, but on a more general point with those contracts, how happy are you to see the ECB putting more money into the women's domestic game and giving more players the professional contracts they deserve?
I think it's excellent. It's amazing. I mean, to see, for example, Eva Gray move to Sunrisers to get a professional contract is excellent. We want more contracts, so we want more people coming through the system, and particularly for Sunrisers. They've got such a wealth of players in Middlesex and Essex and the surrounding counties, so we want to see those young players coming through, getting contracts. And actually Sunrisers being a place where people really want to play cricket and feel inspired to play cricket. So it's exciting that there are more contracts coming out and more opportunities for young players to be professional cricketers.
Definitely. And a moment ago, you mentioned about the warm-up games. They've had particular success in them. Is that a potentially good omen going forward for 2023?
Yeah, I kind of see it both sides. I think you have to be cautious with warm-up games because they don't give the full picture and it's kind of just the start of the season. But they went to Desert Springs in Spain and they recorded 3 wins, and then they've come back and played one warm-up game and they're currently playing one. And they won that last one. So it's a good sign because that they know how to win now. But again, they are warm-up games, so you do have to be cautious. And I think it will say all when I think they have Southern Vipers on the first day of the season. So that'll be the ultimate test, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I think Southern Vipers are one of those sides many will be aiming to beat this year at the top of the game. But let's have a bit of fun now at the end with some predictions for this season. We'll start with the Rachel Hero Flint. First of all, can they improve on that 8th place finish last year?
I think they can. I think they're out of all the teams. I mean, they've kind of got nothing to lose because they have got a lot of games to lose, but they're kind of in the position where they can just go out there and try. I think they could potentially move up to 7th or 6th. I don't think it's going to be silverware this year, but with Andy Tennant coming in as head coach, he seems to have instilled real confidence in a lot of the players, and to have someone as a permanent head coach is something they need because they've had a lot of kind of choppy and changing with that. So I think they could push up to 7th or 6th. The issue with Sunrisers is that they do get bowled out, and then with their bowling, they get whacked around the park. So they kind of need to tighten up on that. They need to try and not get bowled out, and because I think that's where one of their main weaknesses is, because they can't put the runs on the board. So they do need to focus on that. But I think there could be improvement this year.
Nice stuff. And then for the Shark Edwards Cup, similar optimism too?
Yeah, definitely. I think with Danny Van coming in, I mean, I know we are kind of putting a lot on her and relying a lot on her, but I actually think they could do a lot better. When you've got a world-class player, other players will feed off that. And I think someone like Grace Scrivens will improve even more from spending time with someone like Dane, and other players will do the same. So again, I don't think silverware, but I think they'll definitely improve and could potentially push for a spot in 5th. Other teams haven't bought, for example, Western Storm haven't bought in any new players and have lost a few. So actually, they were quite well matched last year, those two teams. So I think they could push ahead of them. But we'll see. I think it's quite an exciting season for Sunrisers.
Definitely. I think there's renewed optimism like there is amongst a few others, the regional sides. That concludes the preview for Sunrisers. Thank you, Polly, for joining us. And thank you, everyone, for watching. There'll still be a couple more to come in the coming days before the season kicks off on Saturday. Thank you.